It was the most expensive white line in the history of sports. One positive test didn't just get Adrian Mutu fired, it ruined his entire life. Unlike other clubs that support their troubled stars, Chelsea hunted him down. Under the orders of Roman Abramovich, they sued their own player for €17, 173,990. He went from earning £60,000 a week to being chased by debt collectors across 2 continents. Did Jose Mourinho set a trap to destroy him? Today, Fallen Legends opens the legal files of the most brutal contract termination in football history. To understand the sheer magnitude of Adrian Mutu's fall, we first have to transport ourselves back to the electric summer of 2003. It was a defining moment in the history of the Premier League, a time when the landscape of English football changed forever. A mysterious Russian billionaire named Roman Abramovich had just landed his helicopter on the lawn of Stamford Bridge, and he brought with him a checkbook that seemed to have no bottom. The Roman Empire was born. It was an era of unprecedented excess glamour and ambition, and the crown jewel of this revolution was a 24-year-old striker with the looks of a movie star and the feet of a magician, Adrian Mutu. When Chelsea paid £15.8 million to bring him from Parma, it was a statement of intent. In 2003, that was a colossal sum of money, a transfer fee that carried the weight of the world. Mutu wasn't just a signing, he was the chosen one. He was the man tasked with leading the Blue Revolution. And for a brief, beautiful window of time, he was perfect. His start to life in London was the stuff of dreams. In his first 3 games, he scored 4 goals. He didn't just score them, he crafted them. He had a swagger that was infectious, a Romanian flair that reminded the faithful at Stamford Bridge of Gianfranco Zola. The fans fell in love instantly. The tabloids dubbed him the Beckham of Romania. He was handsome, he was talented, and he was the face of the new Chelsea. But off the pitch, the reality was shifting. Mutu was handed a contract worth £60,000 a week. To a young man in his early 20s, this was more than just a salary. It was a key to the city. London in the early 2000s was a playground for the rich, a neon-soaked world of exclusive nightclubs in Mayfair, fast cars on the King's Road, and an endless stream of attention. Mutu became the Prince of London. He had the supermodel wife, the Ferrari, and the adoration of millions. Everything he touched turned to gold. He was living a life that 99.9% of the human population could only dream of. But there is a dangerous psychology to sudden immense wealth. When you are young, beautiful, and rich, you begin to believe that the rules of gravity do not apply to you. You begin to believe that the party will never end. The £15.8 million transfer fee and the massive weekly wages were supposed to buy Chelsea a legend. Instead, they funded a lifestyle that was slowly spiraling out of control. The very city that embraced him was also seducing him, whispering in his ear that he could have it all. Looking back at the footage of Mutu in those early days, smiling, celebrating, looking invincible, it evokes a profound sense of nostalgia, tinged with sadness. We are watching a man standing on the edge of a cliff, convinced he is learning how to fly. We see the glory, but we know the receipt is coming. And in the high-stakes world of Roman Abramovich's Chelsea, mistakes weren't just punished, they were billed. The Prince of London was about to find out that the cost of living the high life would be far higher than he ever imagined. London, 2004. The air in West London was thick with anticipation, electric with the promise of a new era. The Roman Abramovich revolution was in full swing, and the charming chaos of the Claudio Ranieri days had been swept away. In his place arrived a man who would change the face of English football forever, Jose Mourinho, the special one. Mourinho brought with him a philosophy of iron discipline, tactical rigidity, and absolute loyalty. He wanted soldiers, not just stars. He wanted warriors who would die for the badge. And then there was Adrian Mutu. If Mourinho was the cold, calculated architect of war, Mutu was the wandering poet, talented, beautiful to watch, but fundamentally flawed and ruled by emotion. From the moment they shook hands, the collision course was set. It was fire meets ice, the hedonistic lifestyle of the Romanian star, the late nights, the flash of the paparazzi bulbs. It was everything Mourinho despised. The manager didn't just see a player, he saw a liability. The tension simmered beneath the surface until the autumn, when the cracks turned into gaping wounds. The first major strike came over national duty. Mutu, nursing a knee injury, was ordered by Chelsea to stay in London to rehabilitate. But the call of his homeland was too strong. Defying the special one, Mutu flew to Prague to represent Romania in a World Cup qualifier. To the fans, it was passion. To Mourinho, it was mutiny. When Mutu returned, the atmosphere at the Cobham training ground had shifted from tense to toxic. He was slapped with a fine, but the punishment felt deeper than money. It felt personal. You could sense the walls closing in on the young striker. He was isolated, a king in exile within his own castle. But while the world focused on the arguments over injuries and playing time, a much darker narrative was being written in the shadows. October 2004. This is where the story shifts from a football drama to a Greek tragedy. There were whispers in London, rumors that Adrian was battling demons far more dangerous than a strict manager. He was sliding, losing his grip on reality, seeking solace in the white powder that has claimed so many bright souls in this city. Mourinho knew. A manager's job traditionally is to be a father figure. When a son strays, you guide him home. You protect him. But Jose Mourinho did not call the police. He did not call a counselor. He did not sit Adrian down and offer a path to rehabilitation. Instead, he set the trap. In a move that remains one of the most controversial in Premier League history, Mourinho ordered a targeted drug test. It wasn't a standard Premier League procedure. It was an internal ambush ordered by the club itself. The intent was chillingly clear. They weren't looking for a diagnosis to treat. They were hunting for a verdict to execute. The test was administered. The wait was agonizingly short. The result positive for cocaine. The world stopped for Adrian Mutu. In that moment, the glamorous life of a Premier League superstar evaporated. He didn't deny it. In a display of heartbreaking naivety, Mutu admitted to his mistake almost immediately. He threw himself at the mercy of the club, perhaps believing in the football family, hoping that his honesty would be met with compassion. He hoped for a suspension, a fine, a chance to rebuild. He was wrong. Gordon Taylor, the chief executive of the Professional Footballers Association (PFA), saw through the corporate machinery immediately. His words spoken in the aftermath still echo with a haunting clarity today. Chelsea did not act to help the player. They acted to find evidence to sack him. It was a cold, calculated disposal. Chelsea didn't just want him out. They wanted to destroy his contract to seek compensation to make an example. The trap had snapped shut, crushing the career of one of Europe's most promising talents. As we look back on this moment through the sepia-toned lens of nostalgia, we are left with a heavy heart and a burning question. We admire Mourinho's genius, his trophy cabinet, his legacy. But in the case of Adrian Mutu, we see the shadow of that ambition. Was Mourinho a tactical genius protecting the sanctity of his squad, or was he a ruthless operator who saw a drowning man and instead of throwing him a lifeline, pushed his head under the water? He knew Mutu was sliding. He knew the boy was lost. But instead of pulling his student up from the edge, he pushed him into the abyss to sanitize his dressing room. The special one had won the battle, but at what cost to the human soul? Mutu was now alone, labeled and cast out. The trap had worked perfectly, and for Adrian, the long, dark winter had just begun. The story of Adrian Mutu is a tragedy in 3 acts. We have seen the dazzling rise, the blinding lights of London, and the entrapment by a manager who demanded perfection. But if the previous chapter was a story of human conflict, this chapter is something far colder, far more ruthless, and fundamentally terrifying. This is not a story about football anymore. This is a story about money, about power, about the moment the beautiful game transformed into a cruel corporate machine. In the history of English football, there has always been an unwritten code. The club protects its own. We remember the legends of the past. Look at Tony Adams at Arsenal. When he stood before his teammates broken by alcoholism, the club did not cast him out. They wrapped their arms around him. They checked him into rehab. They paid his wages. They waited for their captain to return. That is the soul of a football club. That is family. But in 2004 at Stamford Bridge, the soul was being replaced by the balance sheet. Roman Abramovich had arrived, and with him came a new kind of ruthlessness. When Adrian Mutu tested positive, there was no arm around the shoulder. There was no rehab facility booked in the club's name. Instead, Chelsea unleashed a legal nuclear weapon. They cited gross misconduct. It wasn't just a firing, it was an eviction. Mutu was thrown onto the streets of London, his reputation in tatters. But simply firing him wasn't enough for the new regime. They wanted blood. Or more accurately, they wanted their millions back. What followed was a legal pursuit so aggressive, so unprecedented, that it changed the relationship between players and clubs forever. This was the hunt. The logic Chelsea presented to the courts was chilling in its corporate simplicity. Their lawyers argued, "We bought an asset, Adrian Mutu, from Parma for nearly £16 million. We signed him to a 5-year contract. By taking drugs, he breached that contract. He made himself worthless. Therefore, he owes us the money we lost." Pause for a moment and let that sink in. They weren't just saying he wouldn't get paid anymore. They were saying that the human being Adrian Mutu was personally liable for the transfer fee the clubs had traded between themselves. For 4 long, agonizing years, the lawyers circled like sharks. Mutu tried to move on. He went to Italy trying to resurrect his career at Juventus and later Fiorentina. And to his credit on the pitch, the brilliant diamond began to shine again. He scored stunning goals. He became a hero in Florence. For 90 minutes every weekend he was free. But off the pitch, the noose was tightening. In 2008, the hammer fell. FIFA released their dispute resolution, ruling a document that read like a death sentence for a normal life. They ordered Adrian Mutu to pay Chelsea compensation of €17.17 million. 17 million euros. It was the highest fine ever imposed on a football player in the history of the sport. It was a number so large it felt abstract, almost fictitious, but the consequences were terrifyingly real. Mutu fought back. He appealed to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. He appealed to the Swiss Federal Supreme Court. He pleaded that this sum would destroy him, but in 2010 the final door slammed shut. The appeal was dismissed. The debt was absolute. Imagine the psychological torture of living under that shadow. You are a young man, you have made a mistake, a grave mistake. Yes, but you are trying to work, trying to provide, trying to rebuild. Yet every time you step on the field, you aren't playing for glory. You are playing to pay off a billionaire. The hunt extended beyond the courtrooms. It reached into his personal life with icy fingers. His assets were frozen. The rumors swirled that he had to sell his house, his cars, his personal belongings. The wealth he had accumulated through his God-given talent was being siphoned off to satisfy the vengeance of a corporation that didn't need the money. Chelsea Football Club was owned by one of the richest men on the planet. 17 million euros to Roman Abramovich was a rounding error. It was the price of a yacht's fuel tank. But for Adrian Mutu, it was his entire life. It was his past, his present, and his future. This relentless pursuit creates a haunting image in our minds. We see Mutu scoring a goal for Fiorentina, the crowd roaring, the violet shirt clinging to his back. He looks up at the sky, perhaps a moment of joy. But as he walks off the pitch, the silence returns. The lawyers are still there. The debt is still there. This forces us to ask a question that goes to the very heart of labor and human rights. Imagine you work for a tech company. The company spends $50,000 to recruit you. You make a mistake, you violate company policy, and you get fired. That is fair. Actions have consequences. But imagine if a month later you receive a lawsuit. The company says, because you messed up, you must pay us back the $50,000 we spent to hire you. It sounds insane. It sounds illegal. In almost every other profession, it would be unthinkable. But in the twisted, high-stakes world of modern football, this became Adrian Mutu's reality. Was this truly justice? Was this about upholding the sanctity of a contract? Or was this something darker? It feels less like a legal necessity and more like a warning shot fired by the new oligarchs of football. It was a message to every player, every agent, and every human being in the system. Do not cross us. We own you. And if you break, you pay. It looks suspiciously like the vengeance of a billionaire whose pride was wounded. Mutu embarrassed the club, and for that he had to be destroyed. Not just professionally, but financially. The 17 million euro hunt turned Adrian Mutu into a modern-day Sisyphus forced to push a boulder of debt up a mountain for the rest of his career, only to watch it roll back down every time he thought he was free. It stripped the joy from his redemption. It turned his goals into currency. And so as we look back at the wreckage of what could have been one of the greatest careers of the 2000s, we realize that the drug test was only the beginning. The trap set by Mourinho caught him, but it was the ruthless, cold-blooded pursuit of those millions that truly bled him dry. Adrian Mutu paid for his sins, but the price he paid was far greater than any game of football should ever demand. The final act of the Adrian Mutu saga plays out not in the grey drizzle of London, but under the golden sun of Tuscany. After the scandal, after the firing, and after the humiliation, Mutu did what he was born to do. He went back to the pitch. He found sanctuary in Florence wearing the violet shirt of Fiorentina. For a few fleeting years, it seemed as though the brilliant diamond had managed to polish itself. He was magnificent. In Serie A, a league known for its defensive cruelty, Mutu danced. He scored screamers, he curled free kicks into top corners, and he formed partnerships that made the nostalgic hearts of Calcio fans sing. The streets of Florence hailed him as Il Fenomeno. For a moment we believed. We watched him play and thought, he's done it. He has outrun his demons. But the tragedy of Adrian Mutu is that the past was never just a memory. It was a bill collector standing at the gate. Even as the Stadio Artemio Franchi roared his name, the shadow of that colossal 17 million euro debt loomed over him like a dark cloud on a sunny day. He wasn't just playing for glory anymore. He was playing for survival. Every goal he scored felt like a desperate coin tossed into a bottomless pit. And then just as stability seemed within reach, the cycle of self-destruction spun once more. January 2010. The news broke and it felt like a cruel joke. Adrian Mutu had failed another doping test. This time it wasn't cocaine. It was sibutramine, a substance found in appetite suppressants. The irony was heartbreaking. In his desperate attempt to stay fit, to stay sharp, to perhaps extend the career that was his only lifeline to paying off his debt, he had taken a shortcut. He wasn't chasing a high, he was chasing perfection. But the result was the same. A 9-month ban. The silence returned. The redemption arc was shattered not by malice, but by a tragic carelessness that seemed written into his DNA. As the years rolled on and his boots were finally hung up, the football world was left with a heavy, lingering silence. We are left to look at the highlight reels on YouTube, the grainy footage of a young man with the world at his feet, and feel a profound sense of loss. Adrian Mutu had the raw materials of a legend. He possessed the explosive pace of a winger, the finishing instinct of a number 9, and the flair of a classic number 10. In a parallel universe, we are talking about him in the same breath as Thierry Henry, Andriy Shevchenko, or Francesco Totti. He had the talent to hold the Ballon d'Or in his hands. But history is written by the victors, and in this story, the system won. Mutu will not be remembered for the trophies he lifted, but for the documents filed against him. He will be remembered as the protagonist of the most expensive, most ruthless legal battle in the history of FIFA. He serves as the ultimate cautionary tale for every young star who thinks they are bigger than the machine. The final image of his career is a devastating contrast of colors. One night in London, in a moment of weakness, Adrian Mutu inhaled a thin white line. It was a fleeting mistake, a moment of madness. But in response, Chelsea Football Club and the powers that be took a pen and drew a thick, permanent red line through his life. They didn't just end his time at the club, they defined his legacy. The white line gave him a moment of escape, the red line trapped him forever. And that truly is the saddest part of the game.